another Doug the Gardener video. This time we're going to look at how to bud roses, graft trees, and why we get suckers on some of our garden plants and what we can do about them. So this first clip shows a Corylus avellana contorta, and that's a contorted hazel, and you can see that the leaves in most of the plant, well, they're slightly twisted and contorted, hence the name. However, if you look at the centre of the plant, you will see that the growth is different, and these are suckers, and we don't want these. So here I've removed the suckers just to show you what they look like, and these were coming up from the roots of the plant. So this fairly simple drawing shows you what a rose looks like. The brown's the rootstock and the green is the actual plant you want, like the hybrid tea or the floribunda. And here we have a short clip showing our Super Trooper standard rose with 3 grafts at the top of the stem to give a nice even balanced head. So I'm going to show you how to bud a rose now. I've removed the stem from one of our roses and I'm going to prepare it by removing most of the leaf stalks from it. So using a very sharp knife, I'm now going to cut the bud away from the stem. So I take the knife and actually cut under the leaf node, making sure I don't go close to the bud at the bottom of the leaf node. So I'm taking a little bit of the wood plus the bark from the stem. Cutting the bud from the stem, I've taken a little bit of wood from the stem, and that's something I don't want because that will actually stop the bud bonding to the new rootstock. So I need to remove that by flicking it away. So this is the back of the bud, and I'm just pointing out with my knife the small bud which will eventually bond to the rootstock, and that will form the new rose. To make sure this graft's a good fit in the rootstock, I need to top and tail it just to tidy it up. That's the bud all prepared, ready to be grafted onto the rootstock now. As I don't have a rootstock to hand, I'm afraid I'm going to have to use the same stem I used to remove the bud from, just simply to demonstrate how to do it. The first cut I make is across the bark on the rootstock, and the next cut is down from that cut down the stem, probably just about ½ an inch. So I've made 2 cuts in the shape of a figure T. In order to allow us to insert the bud under the bark, I have to splay the bark at the top of the T. Taking the bud, I now carefully push it under the bark from the top of the T downwards, making sure that the leaf stalk is pointing up the way. We now need to protect the joint from drying out, so we'd bind the rootstock bark above and below the leaf node with grafting tape or a budding tie. This will push the bud hard against the rootstock stem, and over a period of a few weeks a strong bond will form and we'll get a shoot from there which will eventually form the new rose. So you may be asking why we use a leaf node for budding. Well, it's because it has a bud at the base of the leaf stalk which has the potential to form a new branch, such as this one. So that has taken me several minutes to show you how to bud a rose. If I were a professional, I would be expected to perhaps do 700 or 800 of these each day. This diagram shows what the rose will look like once it has taken and the branch has started to grow, the actual graft itself. And you'll see I put a black mark across the main stem. That's because after a period of time you'll cut this off, and that will encourage the side shoots to form and make a nice shaped rose. Once the graft is taken and it starts to grow, you no longer need the top of the rootstock, so you would cut that off just above where the graft is. After all, you want to encourage all of the plant's goodness to go into the new graft and not into the top of the rootstock. So we're now going to have a quick look at trees and how they're actually grafted. So this is a top worked cherry. You can see it's actually a graft on top of a nice straight stem. So some trees are top grafted, very similar to the Super Trooper standard rose we saw earlier, and some trees are bottom grafted, and this is quite a different technique altogether. So we're going to look at bottom grafting now. In this image, diagram 1 shows the donor tree, and we're looking at where we're going to take the tip of a branch. That's where the black cut is, and that's going to be the donor tree grafted onto the rootstock. And so diagram number 2 shows the rootstock, which has probably been grown at a specialist nursery doing nothing else but growing rootstock, and it's showing that we're going to cut it off where the black line is. Diagram number 3 shows the rootstock with its roots in situ, ready to be grafted onto. We now cut the bottom of the donor plant's branch, called a sign, into a V, and we make a corresponding notch in the top of the rootstock so the two actually bond together and make a nice tight fit. The closer the contact between the sign and the rootstock, the better. So we would now actually take grafting tape and bind them very tightly together so that the graft doesn't dry out and it's impervious to insect and fungal attack. A special grafting wax would then be painted round about the top of the joint just to make sure it didn't dry out. And finally in diagram 5 it shows how the joint will develop over a period of time, forming a slightly bulbous knuckle at the bottom of the stem. This is a video of Acer Red Sentinel at the front of our garden, and it shows at the bottom of the stem the knuckle we're talking about where the graft was actually made. So back to our problem, what is a sucker? Well, we saw what a sucker looked like on a corylus, but how do we tell it on other plants? Anything at all that emanates from the rootstock, whether it be the stalk above ground or the roots themselves, that's a sucker. You have to be very careful trying to identify suckers, especially in roses. Lots of people say that if your leaf has 7 leaflets, then it's a sucker. That's not true. I looked at our rose the other day in the garden, and to be honest, quite a few of the branches had leaves with 7 leaflets. So once again, it goes back to the basics. The sucker has to come from the rootstock. This picture of a rowan shows tiny shoots starting to grow away from below the graft. So that's from the rootstock, so those are suckers and need to be taken off as soon as possible. Hopefully by now you'll understand what a sucker is, and with a little bit of TLC you'll be able to look after all of your trees, shrubs and roses so they'll look at their best for a long time. Anyway, thank you for watching. This has been a Doug the Gardener video. If you've enjoyed it, please tick like, and I hope to catch you next time. Goodbye.